Good morning to everyone. A very warm welcome to the first international conference on positive psychology by the National Psychology Association. NPPA was established in 2013 to bring together Indian academicians, researchers, practitioners, and students interested in the field of positive psychology. Our family has grown exponentially over the years with all of your support. And we are delighted to welcome you to our two-day virtual conference. We hope this conference will be a rich learning experience for all of you, and collectively we can help further the cause of positive psychology in India. Now, without any further delay, I would like to invite Dr. Shilpa Bandyopadhyay, Executive Committee Member of NPPA and Assistant Professor at OP Jindal Global University, Sonipat, to introduce the key spokespersons of the inaugural session. First of all, Professor Vira Raghavan, Madam, President of NPPA.
Thank you, ma'am. Hello, everyone. We will now proceed to the presidential address, and it is my absolute honor and privilege to welcome Professor Vimla Vira Raghavan, the respected president of NPPA. Professor Vira Raghavan is a doctorate in psychology. She holds a double MA from the University of Delhi, and she was also a gold medalist in Masters in Psychology. She has over 40 years of teaching and research experience and has trained several research scholars. She has also headed the Department of Psychology and Applied Psychology in Delhi University. Besides, she served as an associate professor in Jawaharlal Nehru University, teaching MPhil and PhD scholars. Currently, she is the Dean Academics and an Emeritus Professor of Psychology and Education at APJ Stia University, Gurgaon. Professor Vira Raghavan has been the recipient of several awards. Notable ones include the very prestigious Lifetime Achievement Award of IT for her lifelong contribution to psychology, and she's also won the National Fellow Award of the Indian Council of Philosophical Research. She has authored over 23 books, several book chapters, and has published more than 70 research articles in very well-reputed national and international journals. She has completed more than 20 sponsored research projects by various government bodies like the UGC, the ICSSR, the DIPR, the Department of Women and Childcare, Government of India, to name a few. She is also a resource person to many governmental and non-governmental institutions. It is my absolute privilege to invite ma'am to please deliver our presidential address. Over to you, Vira Raghavan.
Thank you very much, Shilpa, for introducing me. Good morning to all of you. In fact, it is a great privilege and honor for me to deliver the presidential address today to this august gathering of people in virtual mode. It is a great day for NPPA, with all of you joining from abroad and from within India to be part of this international conference, which is perhaps the first one on its birthday of NPPA. This year, in 2023, NPPA is 10 years old, and we thought it would be the right time to review what we have done so far, where we are at the present moment, and visualize and reimagine where we want to be 10 years from today. This international conference has thus the following important purposes. What is the status of positive psychology in the international scenario? What are the trends emerging in positive psychology from the world around? In comparison, where is positive psychology in India? What are the techniques and skills that are exclusive to positive psychology? Have Indian psychologists come up with new and innovative techniques in positive psychology? Who have been the beneficiaries so far? Has there been any attempt to combine indigenous methods with positive psychology methods? Thus, many questions arise in our mind as we complete our 10 years. We need to consider all of the above to discuss the contemporary development in positive psychology. For this, this international conference is perhaps one of the best platforms in which we could share what we have done so far and learn from the world what they have done so far and what is the status of and recent trends in positive psychology. All of you are aware, since the publication by Seligman and his colleague in the year 2000, research studies in positive psychology have entered the mainstream psychology and also in other disciplines such as criminology, management, and social sciences. For instance, we now mention positive psychiatry and positive organizational behavior. Some of the major research findings in this field show the spread of positive psychology discipline leading to measuring human strengths, focusing on human capacity, mental health, happiness, and well-being. A more recent positive psychology approach seems to be that of working through both negative and positive sides of life and situation. It appears to be a holistic and integrative approach and has been used successfully in the psychobiographical research. In these studies, extraordinary people's lives have been presented which contain their negative, painful, and positive experiences in life. All of them have gone through, just as every one of us do, negative and painful aspects in their life, though they have had excellent positive and creative sides to themselves. As is well known, almost every other person, famous or not so famous, does go through negative aspects and perhaps give more credence and focus to the negative ones than the positive aspects. By taking both negative and positive aspects of life together and looking at life from a holistic perspective, the positive psychologist can bring about extraordinary transformation in humans. This, in fact, could be considered the third wave of positive psychology, the other two being micro and meso levels, where the focus had been on individual-related problems to slightly more complex and existential issues. That's why the second wave tried to transform the negative emotions and experiences getting accepted by integrating Western mainstream psychology with indigenous psychology. The third wave has taken it further beyond the individual to group and adopted the multicultural and interdisciplinary approach. In other words, positive psychology in a third wave goes beyond cognitive and behavioral levels and explores the existential grounding of human behavior and the realm of higher consciousness. Another important development that has impacted positive psychology is the Industrial Revolution 4, which is considered the fourth wave, is digitally enabled and rapidly changing the lifestyle of people in society. For instance, new ways of communication, globally occurring phenomena, new value chain, and finally changes in human values and emotions. There are certain ways in which positive psychology can deal with Industrial Revolution 4. These include psychological, psychiatric, and psychobiographical perspective, industrial, organizational, psychology perspective, and third, individual system, community-based ethnographic perspective. In the first one, not only performance must be given importance, but also the well-being of the individual. That means positive psychology, there is an attempt should be made to integrate hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism in performance, which is measured. In this regard, positive psychotherapy can build competence, resilience, emotion regulation, and will be able to help the individual to lead a balanced life. Positive psychology interventions can contribute to building and strengthening the individual's sense of identity, work, and sense of purpose, leading to holistic wellness. The second category, which deals with the industrial or organizational perspective, recommends a shift from problem-oriented to solution-oriented approach. Also, the second category suggests finding positive approaches to deal with challenges and negative emotion in the context of organizational communication. At the same time, one may argue that creativity, solution focus, and positive emotion by themselves will lead us to sustainability and success. According to this category, future research should be more in positive psychology and positive organizational psychology, which would help in getting a strong foundation for building theory and the fourth revolution, workplaces. The last one is the individual system community based. In this, there is a collaborative positive psychology needs to work with negative emotion and bring about positive transformation. To conclude my presidential address, the three categories, when we take them together, suggest that in order to grow, develop, and overcome suffering, challenges of life, negative events, and trauma that cause pain in life, and also to deal with disturbing emotions and the psychological pain that we saw in the psychobiographical research, it is important to stimulate new ideas, insight, critical thinking, and adopt multidisciplinary approach to deal with issues and problems faced by people. Technology-based human interaction, human-machine learning, and way of balancing life, work, nature, and technology will all be the research focus in positive psychology, as well as in the applied fields, namely counseling and psychotherapy. With this few words of address, of presidential address, I thank all of you for listening to me and also wishing every one of you a wonderful, meaningful participation in this international conference. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for gracing us with your virtual presence and for such an insightful address where you so beautifully summed up the current and the contemporary developments in the field of positive psychology. I now welcome Professor Kamala Singh, Secretary and Treasurer of NPPA. Dr. Singh is a professor of psychology at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. She has published 2 co-authored books, Measures of Positive Psychology, Development and Validation with Springer, and Translation on Research and Applied Psychology in India with Sage Publishers. She is also the author of the award-winning book, Bhartiya Sandarbh Mein Vyavaharik Sakaratmak Manovigyan. It was awarded the Rajbhasha Gaurav Award for Original Book Writing in Hindi on Gyan Vigyan for Citizens of India by the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India. She has published over 100 papers in peer-reviewed national and international journals and around 17 book chapters. In 2019, she was the recipient of the very prestigious Shane J. Lopez Award for Professional Contributions in Positive Psychology by the Section on Positive Psychology, APA, or the American Psychological Association. I now request Professor Kamala Singh to please take over and give us an overview of the conference and also give us her views about the current status of positive psychology in India. Over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, I think you're muted.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me share my screen first. Is it shared with you all?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, we can see it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for a lovely introduction, Shilpa. Positive psychology in India, and ma'am has, explained very well what are latest development of positive psychology in the world. And now let's move towards positive psychology in India. We all of us know, however, it's in history of psychology. There are, various examples where positive psychology term was used again and again by various scholars. Like Abraham Maslow used positive psychology term. But, Martin Seligman, during his presidency in 1998, he highlighted positive psychological studies and positive psychological studies and counted that need of having positive psychology. Number of research papers were there, how we are focusing more on negative aspects rather than on positive aspects. And we should talk about positive psychological construct more rather than just to balance it. So after that, the field is growing like anything. And there are various definitions of positive psychology. So one of them is the scientific study of what makes life most worth living, focusing on both individual and societal well-being. As Mark Holder has mentioned, how it is different from traditional psychologies. Traditional psychologies focus more on what is wrong with you and how can we fix it. On the other hand, positive psychology asks what is right with you and how can we promote it. Now in modern positive psychology, there are various intervention programs based on character strengths. Know your character strengths, use them in a better manner, and these are the ways to increase productivity, well-being, and creativity in your life. Especially in Indian setting, I think Indian psychology is again very, very important field for us to collaborate to have positive psychology in India. So we know Indian psychology, the hallmark of Indian perspective is inner directed and spirituality. And that's the core area of Indian psychology. And Indian psychology has drawn from ideology and scriptures of different religions, like Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sufism, etc. And the goal is to seek enduring harmony of spirit, mind, and body for everlasting happiness. So we know broadly both fields are addressing well-being. But ways of addressing well-being in Indian psychology and positive psychology, these are to some extent interconnected, but still have their own individuality. So positive psychology in India, I think, should address positive psychological and Indian psychological perspective both, which is reflecting in these 2 days conference sessions also. So after its initiation, positive psychology growing like anything in terms of documented researches, whether these are empirical researches or on non-empirical researches. So you could see the graph, how a number of studies year by year increasing. And however, it started from US, but later on other countries, almost all corners of the world took up this field and started to work in this area of positive psychology. So 2007 onwards, you could see non-US countries publishing more than US articles. So now I think it's not only from West, almost in all countries, positive psychology growing in a very, very well way it's going ahead. In history of now, it's a small, period of say about 25 years. Some scholars capturing its changes, how we are moving towards one wave to another wave, and then the next one. Professor Antonella has also included this point. First of all, like we focus more on positivity only. Then they said no positivity, negativity, polarity should be addressed it. And now in third wave, in terms of contextual, in terms of system informed, in terms of cultural linguistic ethics, and even methods expansion is there now, promoting qualitative apart from quantitative. However, earlier we were more, on data-based, on number-based researches, but now, basket is quite broad and it's open. Positive psychology in India, broadly, studies can be divided in 4 sections. In some cases, we may work like a mainstream, positive psychologist, but in others, we may connect with Indian psychological studies. And when we are connecting with it, I think it's our unique contribute to the mainstream positive psychology. So that's why that's our possession we should take care of. And step by step through researches, through our understanding, we could bring number of constructs in the mainstream positive psychology. So one type of studies could be positive psychological constructs, and like mainstream mainstream scholars, we are doing, say, correlational researches, cause and effect, mediating, moderating variables, role of socio-demographic variables, etc. On the other hand, maybe, we have Indian psychological constructs, making understanding about them, and even developing some psychological tests, maybe a psychological test on Sachidanand, Anasakti, Sukhduk, Ashtang Yoga, Sattva-Rajas Tamas, Vedic personality, Vikaras, Savadhyay or Karmi Yoga, or maybe a number of other constructs may be borrowed from our religious literature, which is helping us to understand human behavior. And then how these Indian constructs are correlated with mainstream, positive psychological constructs. So through all these processes, we are able to make understanding better positive psychology in Indian setting. And simultaneously, first of all, some of these psychological tests are being developed in Western or European countries. When we are using them here in Indian setting, then we should know, we have to adapt, we have to revalidate whether these are working properly in Indian setting or not. I think when in the fourth area, so we could do research like a mainstream positive psychologist, or how connecting Indian psychological and positive psychological constructs, and accordingly we could develop some psychological tests. When we move towards theoretical to practical wings, that's the intervention programs. And in applied positive psychology, now hundreds of intervention programs are there. Developmental and evaluation intervention programs are there. But apart from this, we know some socio-cultural issues which are very unique here in Indian setting, may facilitate our well-being or hinder our well-being. So we need to know, and here, because we have diversity in India, so that's why area to area it differ. And then we could reinforce facilitating factors and understand how obstacles are there and what are the issues. Similarly, religious spiritual practices, very common here in India. Number of organizations are, delivering some special sessions, or say 5 days program, 7 days program. We could test this effectiveness. We know in India, India is has various religions, and religion and spirituality is very, very important domain to understand human behavior. And scholars have been trying to establish these relations and how it works. If we just talk about Professor Bhauk's book, Spirituality and Indian Psychology, lessons from the Bhagavad Gita, and there are various modules through which we can understand human behavior. Professor Dong's very interesting book, Why Religion and Spirituality Matter for Public Health. And this year only, this book published Handbook of Positive Psychology, Religion and Spirituality. So we know now in the domain of positive psychology, religious and spiritual domain is being studied a lot. And for us, it gives, more importance to explore Indian psychological perspectives. Then by considering these all, there could be some areas where Indian scholars could do more researches. One is we just parallelly grow with mainstream positive psychology. This year only, Professor Rook with his team wrote a book, Handbook of Positive Psychology Assessment. So there are various new constructs and comparatively less explored constructs like appreciation of beauty, nostalgia, primal world beliefs, imagination, humor, playfulness, emotion of wonder. And Maslow highlighted to say experience this emotion as an essential component of a good life. So we may explore these constructs in our research. Self-transcendent experiences, variety of experiences are there. Can we highlight first person approach and talk about religious experiences, spiritual experiences, peak experiences, near-death experiences, mystical experiences, etc. How can we create more effective positive paths to happiness and well-being in Indian communities? There are various already ongoing programs, say in Isha Foundation, Art of Living, Heartfulness Meditation, other platforms having say 5 to 7 days programs. So we psychologists could see how these are working effectively, and what are their strategies which are useful for them. So we know, as Professor Raghavan also mentioned, use of technology. So edutainment approach by using social media, that is also important for us to use modern technology to deliver our programs, to make them more psychoeducational Indian populations, and even providing some counseling, positive psychotherapies, etc. Empirical testing of some ongoing government and NGOs programs, like nowadays in different schools, some programs are going on, but still need to test their effectiveness, like happiness curriculum in Delhi schools, skill journeys of the Andhra Pradesh government, emotional and social intelligence programs in Indian schools, inclusion of Indian psychological constructs in mainstream psychology. So by considering all these things, Indian psychology, I think Indian positive psychology should be connected with positive psychology mainstream, as well as Indian psychology, which is our area, and we Indian psychologists contribute to the mainstream psychology by using its theories and human behavior understandings. By considering the overall view, in the first international conference on positive psychology, we have world-renowned positive psychologists working in the area of psychology and related fields, positive psychology and related field. You could see our esteemed speakers in different sessions. So and we have covered various areas like hope. Professor Elena Antonella, ma'am, going to talk about flow experiences. Professor Manas, happiness, and Professor Amrita and Professor Anindita about resilience and gratitude, like that, and Professor Dong Oman, mindfulness and public health. So like that, mainstream positive psychological constructs, latest developments and all is part of this conference. Then we move towards spirituality. Professor Sonia says they would be talking about spirituality and globalization, and then hardcore Indian psychological topics like Professor Bhauk's topic, Sukh Anand, and Professor Sam Manikam's Anandamay Kosh. And we have selected some findings from the field by different NGOs like Corstone, by Dawa and Dua program, by Sangat, Mr. Deepak and his team going to present about it, and Dr. Rusi about national mental health policies, and the application positive psychotherapy by Dr. Tayyab Rashid, and Dr. Portland talking about happiness minds innovations. Total, there are 140 paper presentations related to different themes. We are going to cover in these 2 days conference, and 2 symposium, one on student well-being in the post-pandemic times, best practices, and second one, pranic healing and energy intervention for flourishing. We are grateful, express our gratitude to all the speakers and chairs of the sessions. Hope you are going to enjoy this 2 days event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for such an enlightening talk, which is of immense relevance to all of us who are present here today, particularly in terms of the current status of positive psychology in India. And also, thank you for giving us an idea of what is coming ahead in the conference and what is it that we can look forward to. So now we will move to the last segment of the inaugural session, which is the inaugural keynote lecture by Professor Antonella Dalle Fave. Professor Antonella, MD, specialized in clinical psychology. She is a professor of psychology at the Medical School, University of Milano, Italy. Her research interests include the study of mental health indicators, flow experience, and daily functioning across cultures and among individuals experiencing conditions of diversity and adversity. She is involved in research and intervention projects which are aimed at promoting well-being and mental health in different life domains, with specific attention to work and health. Since 2009, with partners from different countries, she is engaged in the eudaimonic and hedonic happiness investigation project in order to explore cultural and regional variations in the conceptualizations of happiness, goals, and sources of meaning in life. Her scientific production includes papers in international peer-reviewed journals, as well as authored and edited academic volumes. She served as the president of the International Positive Psychology Association, the European Network of Positive Psychology, and Società Italiana di Psicologia Positiva. Since 2010, she is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Happiness Studies. We are extremely grateful to Professor Antonella, who very kindly agreed to pre-record her keynote lecture. As it is currently 4:30 a.m. in Italy, we cannot have Professor Antonella join live with us. However, we will still have the opportunity to catch her live tomorrow for one of our keynote sessions. I shall now request my team member, Deepika, to please play the recording.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having invited me to participate in this international conference in the role of the keynote speaker during the opening ceremony. This is a great honor. And for this reason, I'm especially grateful to Professor Vira Raghavan, President of the National Positive Psychology Association, and to Professor Kamala Singh, a dear friend and colleague, besides being the secretary and treasurer of the association. I was asked to address a quite thorny and demanding issue, I would say, namely speaking about the contemporary developments in positive psychology. It is challenging to address this issue because in very few decades, positive psychology has grown amazingly across a variety of domains and potential areas of application. In order to try to summarize the current challenges and potential future avenues of development for positive psychology, I will start by referring to a paper that has been just published in the Journal of Positive Psychology. It is a systematic review by Fanzil and colleagues dealing with the criticisms and critiques to towards positive psychology. I am going to share my screen. In order to discuss this issue with you. In this paper, there is a short summary of the criticisms against or towards positive psychology across 6 different aspects. The first one is the lack of a unifying meta-theoretical perspective. Many critics of positive psychology maintain that there is not yet an appropriate definition of what is positive, based on an artificial divide between the positive and the negative, which is hardly happening in real life. Critics also discuss about the lack of clarity in concept definition. Flourishing has been defined in different ways and through the measurement of different variables. So the concept itself of flourishing is not clear, as it is not clear the concept of happiness or of well-being. Sometimes there is a reduction of well-being to positive experience, bringing together a variety of psychological dimensions and states that cannot be really compatible with each other. Very often in positive psychology, what is evaluated and analyzed at the individual level is sic and simpliciter expanded to groups and communities and societies, even though we basically cannot do it. What is measured at the individual level is not necessarily true or similar at the group level. And then basic critiques concerning the theory and models behind interventions is the lack of solidity of these theories and models of positive change. As concerns the second point, there are issues in positive psychology with measurement and methods of research. There is a mushrooming of a variety of instruments to assess different constructs. Sometimes the same construct is assessed through different measures, with some parts overlapping and some parts not. There is a great confusion in how positive psychology instruments are developed. Sometimes they are developed very quickly without real strong test, retest, validation, and evaluation of the psychometric properties. Very strong emphasis on a positivistic approach in instrument development based on the empirical need of measure through quantitative scales, which are as short as possible and as general as possible. Very often correlational designs are used, but causality is inferred despite the impossibility to infer any causality and any relationship more than association between variables through correlational designs. And then there are most studies adopt one single method without concern, for example, of the need to combine different methodologies as well as different kind of measure. For example, the combination of physiological and psychological measures. There is very poor replication potential in many positive psychology studies. There is limited evidence of, for example, the effectiveness of intervention, at least for most interventions. Effect size are usually very small. There are no multi-method support for some statements, like, for example, that some treatment based on positive psychology during cancer prolongs life or improves the reaction to medicaments. These are sometimes statements that are not really proved through empirical biological evidence. There is a tendency to the confirmation bias, namely only positive results are shown while there are no publications concerning negative results. And then there is the tendency to generalize based on small samples. Other critics maintain that positive psychology is nothing new in psychology. There were theories dating back to the 50s, like Rogers and Maslow and Maria Jahoda, already speaking about positive mental health. And very often, positive psychology relies on methods and constructs which are typical of mainstream psychology, however, trying to depart from mainstream psychology. In intervention studies, very often interventions rely on techniques which are typical of cognitive behavioral psychology without acknowledging it. Another critique concerns the supposed neoliberalist ideology as a background for positive psychology, as a meta-theoretical assumption for positive psychology, we could say. Not meta-theoretical, but ideological assumption. Most of the constructs, theories and models were developed in labs based in Western, or better, weird countries, with assuming the view of the independence of the individual as the summum bonum, as the highest expression of well-being and mental health. And individual mental health is categorized in different typologies of individuals, like the flourishing ones against the languishing ones, neglecting the context in which this assessment is performed, especially the cultural context and the values characterizing a society, for which a positive attribute in a Western country could reveal as a negative attribute. And then neglecting issues related for typically emerging in multicultural societies. What about minorities and gender differences and conditions of discriminated minorities like LGBTQ or migrants or other kind of populations that do not belong to the mainstream general population of the nation in which data are collected. And then there is a claim that positive psychology has created a sort of happiness marketplace, selling interventions, selling counseling, training programs for money, and maintaining that it will be possible to achieve 100% functioning for 100% of the time. Commercialization of interventions, So these are very harsh critics in some respects, as you can see. And many of these critics, however, have been already acknowledged and analyzed and also counterbalanced within positive psychology itself across the decades. And this has brought scholars to identify three waves of positive psychology. The first one, in which the basic concepts and constructs were developed. And positive psychology was launched as a scientific movement within psychology, starting from the 2000 issue of The American Psychologist until 2010, more or less. It was a period of concept and construct development, theory development, and adopting and relying very much upon, it is true, quantitative methods, positivistic views, and based in and studies based in Western laboratories. The second wave, starting around 2010, started by a criticism raised by a paper written by Paul Wong, maintaining that it is nonsense to focus on the positive only, because life is not made of positive things only. We should take into account the interplay between positive and the negative in life events and in psychological processes and experiences. And then the importance of contextualizing positive psychology studies within cultures and socio-economic milieux. This has been actually done during the last decade by a growing number of studies. And then the third wave is the present and the future of positive psychology, we can say. What do we mean with third wave of positive psychology? This was discussed in the papers mentioned here by Wissing and Lomas and colleagues. The third wave has to do with a better consideration by positive psychology of the need for a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary integration of findings. And taking into account the growing complexity of the world, taking into account the growing complexity of the times in which we live, and the challenges that human beings will face in the future, not only human beings, but the planet, including challenges for the ecosystem and challenges for the survival of species, not only humans, and also challenges in terms of the technological advancements, like the growth in technology and big data and artificial intelligence and all the omic sciences. So all these challenges need to be addressed only if positive psychology adopts a broader view and opens itself to the inter-exchange with other disciplines. This is, of course, not new. The biopsychosocial model of for the understanding of human experience dates back of 1982. It was developed by a psychiatrist, George Engel, who maintained that in order to understand behavior and experience of individuals, we have to take into account the interplay of individual behavior and experience with different layers of biological systems and different layers of social community and relational and cultural systems. So it was acknowledged as a challenge and as a need in the beginning of the 80s, but today approaching psychological studies taking into account these aspects has become mandatory. In fact, we are increasingly often hearing about One Health. The challenges the planet is facing in terms of climate change, pollution, sustainability issues is leading scientists from any discipline to take into account the importance of communication, collaboration, and coordination across disciplines, across stakeholders, across nations, and across policies in order to achieve a solution to the multiple problems the planet is facing. The United Nations a few years ago launched an agenda for sustainable development, clearly stressing that development interventions and evaluations must be integrated, taking into account the need for coordination in increasingly complex context with multiple partners, with interacting in a network configuration and trying to harmonize different perspectives. To this purpose, the United Nations have set 17 sustainable development goals, and one of them is health and well-being for all, intending for all, not just individuals, but human communities, nations, other species, vegetables, the ecosystem as a whole. And for this reason, we cannot anymore see positive psychology, and individual well-being isolated from this need for interconnectedness and networking across discipline. This is definitely a great challenge for psychologists in general, not just for positive psychologists, but since positive psychologists are specifically dealing with issues of well-being and mental health, they are first then and over and above other psychologists called into play, because positive psychology has been trying to define what is positive, has been struggling to identify avenues for promoting well-being. More recently and importantly, ethical considerations have been raised about what is positive, what can we guarantee for well-being to people, also taking into account the ethical aspects of well-being, namely values, local values, cultural values, and human values as a whole. And to this purpose, I would like just to provide some hints to you as members of the positive psychology, of the National Positive Psychology Association, and as researchers and practitioners, students, and applied psychologists working in India. Can we think about the development of a positive Indian psychology? Not to compartmentalize, to further compartmentalize positive psychology, of course. This is not the aim of my talk here, but to add complexity to positive psychology itself and to psychology as a whole. India is now the biggest, the most populous democracy in the world, and one of the most complex cultures, and one of the most complex and the most multicultural, multi-language nations in the world. This is a source of challenges, but this is an amazing wealth. And Indian culture has developed across millennia a very detailed view of human psychology. It can be traced back in the Indian scriptures, in the traditional approaches to mental health, for example, Ayurveda. And in my opinion, it would be a great gift to humanity and to the world to critically investigate positive psychology theories and models through the lens of the diversity of Indian cultures and through the lens of traditional Indian psychology. It would allow for enriching positive psychology of concepts, models, and constructs which are currently invisible because not belonging to the Western tradition. I also think that research studies could be conducted capitalizing of the multicultural and multilingual context of India by rigorously validating positive psychology measures across different ethnic groups and linguistic groups, and development and validation of indigenous constructs and measures, and also the adoption of multi-method designs, taking into account study samples and goals. For example, we know very well that going in villages with a very low level of literacy and asking people to answer on scaled questions or checklists is meaningless. It does not provide us with any information. While using focus groups and interviews or open-ended questions is much more heuristically useful, and it can open up new avenues of research to any researcher in the world. And at the same time, another level of possibility for Indian psychologists is to integrate positive psychology intervention in cultural fair models, which can include traditional Indian approaches to mental health promotion, which could be the adoption of, for example, pranayama strategies or asanas or Ayurvedic treatments, both physical and herb treatments, or the variety of approaches to mental health that are available to Indian scholars since millennia. I think this would be a responsibility for Indian psychologists, but this would also be give impulse to a new avenue within this third wave of positive psychology, broadening the perspective and promoting integration. And in order to further support the importance of this approach, I would like to conclude my presentation with this picture, which is taken in Geneva, in front of one of the buildings of the CERN, which is an important center for physics. There is a very nice statue of Shiva Nataraj. And it was purposefully decided to put Shiva Nataraja here to symbolize the fact that ancient knowledge is not incompatible with the most advanced steps of contemporary knowledge, because human beings have always tried to understand the universe. They have used different technologies, but basically the darshan, the view, the general intuition of human beings have been proved stable throughout millennia. And for this reason, I think, again, India has a lot to provide and offer to positive psychology, to psychology in general, to a better integration of mental health within UN Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much for this invitation.
Well, that was Professor Antonella helping us understand and acknowledge the issues, struggles, challenges in the field of positive psychology, the way forward, and also helping us understand the ways in which we can integrate positive psychology and Indian psychology. Well, with this, we come to the end of our inaugural session. A lot of thanks to everybody who joined us for this session. And needless to say, we are really privileged to have several distinguished national and international scholars as our keynote speakers. We also have a lineup of really interesting paper presentations and poster presentations, as well as 2 symposium presentations. With this, I now hand over the floor to Dr. Justine Kaur, who is the moderator for the next keynote session. Over to you, Dr. Justine.